Good Monday, everyone, and welcome into today's daily Bible reading for December the 12th. Today we are reading together from Proverbs 25, which is gives us some indication that this is a new section of our reading here within the Proverbs, as is indicated in verse number 1 of Proverbs 25, that these two are Proverbs of Solomon, which we would expect. That's what the Proverbs are known for. But here is the new addition. These are ones that the men of King Hezekiah of Judah copied. So this seems to be the personal collection of the wise sayings of Solomon that Hezekiah's men have collected. So we're actually going to see a few redundant verses, at least very similar ideas, if not the exact same Proverbs repeated verbatim. But there is still a lot of good, new, and fresh information for us to look at here, some fresh tidbits of wisdom. So let's go ahead and get reading here within the text of Proverbs 25. Proverbs 25 in verse number 1. Again, we noted that these two are the Proverbs of Solomon, which the men of King Hezekiah of Judah copied. And here we get into what they collected. It is the glory of God to conceal a matter, and the glory of kings to investigate a matter. As the heavens are high and the earth is deep, so the hearts of kings cannot be investigated. Remove impurities from silver, and material will be produced for a silversmith. Remove the wicked from the king's presence, and his throne will be established in righteousness. Don't boast about yourself before the king, and don't stand in the place of the great, for it is better for him to say, "Come up here," than to demote you in plain view of a noble. Don't take a matter to court hastily. Otherwise, what will you do afterward if your opponent humiliates you? Make your case with your opponent without revealing another's secret. Otherwise, the one who hears will disgrace you, and you'll never live it down. A word spoken at the right time is like gold apples in silver settings. A wise correction to a receptive ear is like a gold ring or an ornament of gold. To those who send him, a trustworthy envoy is like the coolness of snow on a harvest day. He refreshes the life of his masters. The one who boasts about a gift that does not exist is like clouds and wind without rain. A ruler can be persuaded through patience, and a gentle tongue can break a bone. If you find honey, eat only what you need, otherwise you'll get sick from it and vomit. Seldom set foot in your neighbor's house, otherwise he'll get sick of you and hate you. A person giving false testimony against his neighbor is like a club, a sword, or a sharp arrow. Trusting an unreliable person in a difficult time is like a rotten tooth or a faltering foot. Singing songs to a troubled heart is like taking off clothing on a cold day, or like pouring vinegar on soda. If your enemy is hungry, give him food to eat, and if he is thirsty, give him water to drink. For you will heap burning coals on his head, and the Lord will reward you. The north wind produces rain, and a backbiting tongue angry looks. Better to live on the corner of a roof than to share a house with a nagging wife. Good news from a distant land is like cold water to a parched throat. A righteous person who yields to the wicked is like a muddied spring or polluted well. It is not good to eat too much honey or to seek glory after glory. And finally, verse 28 here of Proverbs 25, a person who does not control his temper is like a city whose wall is broken down. Again, Proverbs 25. Well, my top 3 for today from here in Proverbs 25, I begin looking at the collection of wisdom that really stood out apparently to Hezekiah and his men. My top 5 begins in verse number 4. Verse number 4 and verse number 5. Remove impurities from silver, and material will be produced for a silversmith. Remove the wicked from the king's presence, and his throne will be established in righteousness. What we're talking about is what helps to better us. The principles here, at least from the silversmith's perspective, is if you have silver, whenever you heat it up, what happens? Well, the dross comes to the top, and the dross is scraped away, is spooned out and thrown away, so that what you have here is pure silver that can really be worked with and made into something great. Whenever we're talking about the king's presence, we're talking, I believe, about his inner court, those who are his closest counsels will remove the wicked from those who are closest to him, and then he will be able to be established in righteousness. Again, he has the best things to work with. So the principle that is applied to our life is this: what is there in our lives that is unnecessary? But not even just unnecessary, but what is there within our lives that's actually harmful to us, that keeps us from being the best we can be? Is there something in our life that hinders us? If there is, then we need to spoon it away. We need to scrape it away. We need to get rid of that which harms us so that we can be the best we can be. If there's anything holding us back in our lives, we need to get rid of that so that we can move forward and grow and continue to develop ourselves as stronger and stronger followers of Jesus. So that's my number one for today. Verses 4 and 5, remove the impurities, remove the wicked. That way we can be the best we can be, because we have gotten rid of that which hinders us and holds us back. And that's my number one. My number two is right after it, verses 6 and 7. Don't boast about yourself before the king, and don't stand in the place of the great, for it is better for him to say to you, come up here, than to demote you in plain view of a noble. I have written out here that it is better to be humble than to be humbled. It is better to be humble than to be humbled. So this is the idea here in verses 6 and 7, that there are people who desire the places of greatness. So they're going to insert themselves in those places of greatness. But what happens is, if they're not worthy of that position, then what happens? Well, then they're going to be demoted. That's embarrassing. It's embarrassing to be told that you're not good enough for this position. You need to be knocked down a step or two. It's much better instead to be a humble person and to just work hard, keep our head down, and be exalted or to be promoted. That's much better. I think a lot about the sons of thunder that come to Jesus, or maybe the sons of Zebedee, excuse me. I remember they come to Jesus, they say, hey, let one of us sit here and let one of us sit there, and that way we can have these great spots whenever you come into your kingdom. And that's what launches Jesus into the teaching in Mark 10, I believe it is, where he says, if you want to be first, you got to be last. You got to be a servant of all. I think that teaching of Jesus very much ties into these two sayings of wisdom here in Proverbs 25 and verses 6 and 7. Again, don't boast about yourself before the king. Don't try to make yourself sound great. Don't try to take up a position of greatness. Instead, just work hard and allow others to see that so they can put you into that position. If you're really all that great, if you're actually something special, think about what my mom always used to say: you don't have to tell people. If you really are great, people will note that. You don't have to tell them about it. So that's what I'm seeing here. Again, the way I would summarize this: better to be humble than to be humbled. Better to be humble than to be humbled. That's my number two here, verses 6 and 7 on this day. All right, finally, verse 21. Verse 21 and 22, which this should sound familiar to us, because I believe one of these, at least the first half, is part of Jesus's teaching, and the second half, I believe, comes from, or at least is echoed in Romans chapter 12, verses 21 and 22. If your enemy is hungry, give him food to eat. If he is thirsty, give him water to drink. For you will heap burning coals on his head, and the Lord will reward you. It's really easy whenever we have somebody that we might consider our enemy. It's really easy to stoop down to their level, isn't it? It's really easy to, whenever they throw mud at us, to throw mud back at them. That's really easy to do. It's almost natural, it seems to do that. That's our human inclination, is to, whenever we are hurt, to hurt in return. But the wisdom of Solomon here, which both Jesus echoes and Solomon echoes, is that no, whatever other people do to you, you don't stoop to their level. You continue to love your enemies. That's what Jesus says: love your enemies. Do what is best for them. Hope for the best for them. We've seen on a number of occasions over the past couple of chapters these wise sayings that talk about, don't rejoice whenever your enemy stumbles. Why? Well, if it is our enemy and what they do harms us, then maybe we're glad that they can't harm us anymore. But we should not just be happy that something bad happens to them. That's not the expectation for those who follow Jesus. Whether we are thinking about the wisdom given here by Solomon, or the wisdom, the instruction given to us by Jesus, it is our expectation to love to love everyone, even our neighbors. I know that's hard. I know it is, but that's the expectation. And if we can do that, again, what we see here in verse 22, you'll be heaping burning coals on his head, and the Lord will reward you. That's the Lord's expectation for us to love everybody, even our enemies, to do what's best for them. And in doing so, we will show them the true wisdom of God and the love of Jesus. So that's my top 3 for today. Again, verses 4 and 5. Remove impurities from silver, and material will be produced for a silversmith. Remove the wicked from the king's presence, and his throne will be established. That's my number 1. My number 2 is verses 6 and 7. Don't boast about yourself before the king, and don't stand in the place of the great, for it is better for him to say to you, come up here, than to demote you in plain view. And then number 3, verses 21 and 22. If your enemy is hungry, give him food to eat. If he is thirsty, give him water to drink. For you will heap burning coals on his head, and the Lord will reward you. That's my top 3 for today. If you have any of these texts that have stood out to you, please feel free to leave those in the comment section here on Facebook or YouTube. And I hope that this reading gives you something to think about today. I hope that it has given you some wisdom to apply within your life so that we can all be wise people and great servants of our Lord Jesus Christ. We're looking forward to reading again tomorrow. We'll be reading from Proverbs 26. Hope you can join in then. Take care and God bless.